Thanks for joining us on the Leeds Rugby League Heritage podcast. My name's Phil Daly. I'm the head of Media and PR here at Leeds Rhinos. I'm delighted to be joined today by Professor Tony Collins. And we've got a very special time coming up in the Rugby League calendar this year. The Ashes returns. The Kangaroos are over to take on England, and we're delighted that one of those tests, the third test, is going to be here at AMT Headingley because it really brings the game full circle. This is where the first international was played in 1908 between the Northern Union and the All Golds when they came over, but it's the Ashes that has a very special place in the heritage here at Headingley. Ashes and Headingley go together like pie and peas.
Absolutely. And I think, obviously, the first point to make is that there's only Headingley and the Sydney Cricket Ground that stage the Ashes in both rugby league and cricket. So it's a kind of, it's going to be a homecoming. And for me, the Ashes at Headingley, Great Britain or England versus Australia Test match at Headingley, it's pretty much the pinnacle of the game. So many great memories, and also bad memories from matches that we've lost. And it's, to me, growing up as a kid, Headingley, and people in Leeds still believe this, I'm sure. Headingley was the top stadium, and to come and play at Headingley or to come and watch Test matches at Headingley was the pinnacle of the game. And I think that when you go back through history, it's always been a place where the essence of rugby league, and no disrespect to the other nations, but the Great Britain or England versus Australia Test matches are really what rugby league is all about, because the length of the rivalry, the intensity of the rivalry, it all comes together at Headingley, I think. So I can't wait for it to kick off.
And the Kangaroos have always sort of based themselves around it, and invariably have 1, 2, or sometimes 3 games at Headingley. In the early days, that was important because the tour needed paying for, and they knew they could get a crowd in, whether it was playing Leeds or Yorkshire or that Test match. Oh,
absolutely, yeah. And so as you say, sometimes there's more than one game played at Headingley, because obviously the tourists would play Leeds. They might well play Yorkshire here. So it's, and I think partly because Headingley was one of the biggest grounds in rugby league for a long, long time. But also because it's got there's a charisma about the ground. And the fact that it's also known for cricket gives it a kind of national status that, again, no disrespect to any other rugby league ground, that most rugby league grounds don't really have in the national consciousness. So it's almost like playing in London, that it puts our game on the national map, at the centre of a national sporting culture. And, there's... I can still remember, though it's frustrating, the 1982 Test match when Great Britain finally scored a try at Headingley. It was like just a sort of an emotional outpouring. I mean, partly because we witnessed one of the greatest teams of all time, and the fact that we could score a try against them at last made such a difference. But it's kind of the fact it was at Headingley, I think, made it even more special, because Headingley and rugby league and the international game are so bound up together that this is people in Lancashire would probably disagree with this, but it's very much the heartbeat of rugby league.
And it goes right back to those early days, those first tourists when they came over, they came to Headingley, and then the post-war years. It really had a boom in significance about what that game was about.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you see the first test match against Australia after the war. There was a fantastic match, and there's still footage around of it. I think the first colour footage of Headingley, you see the test match, and I think it's like 40,000 people. I mean, God knows how they all crammed in. But it's almost like, and you get a sense of the crowd there. It's almost like things are finally back to normal after the war, and we're back in the place where where we're comfortable, where we enjoy ourselves, where we are a community. I think that's the other thing about the stadium as well. It's kind of got that sense of, in a sense now, because it's not a mega stadium that's kind of. It's kind of, in a sense, some of them I think are too big and they lack atmosphere, too corporate. I think Headingley's always got the sort of, despite all the improvements that have been made in developments, Headingley's always got its roots. You always understand where Headingley comes from, and that again that shows up when you come to the pinnacle of the game England versus Australia.
Do you think for the Australians it holds a special place as well? Because, you know, it's where Bradman scored his three hundreds in one day, and that history that goes there. It's part of their, you know, it's a place that they know, and it's anchored in their sporting consciousness as well.
Oh, absolutely. A good example of that. What must have been about 16 years ago. I had a visitor come over from Australia, and he wanted to look at some rugby league grounds. So I spent a day ferrying him around rugby league grounds in Yorkshire, and we ended up at Headingley. And so took him around, and about halfway through, he said, "Just a minute, I've got to ring someone." Took out his phone and rang his father in Sydney and said, "You'll never believe where I am. I'm on the pitch at Headingley. I can't believe that I'm here." And I think that was kind of, you know, that's how people feel about it. And, you know, I'd guess in the same way that I felt going to the Sydney Cricket Ground. It's kind of that, it's kind of a spiritual home for the game. Wherever you're from, it doesn't matter whether you're from Leeds or from Yorkshire or wherever. If you're a rugby league fan, Headingley is one of those spiritual homes that has so much, you know, it's so wrapped up in the history of the game and the traditions that, you know, you can't help but be excited when you're here, because you're stepping in the footsteps of everybody else who's been, you know, great cricketers, great rugby league players, and the great games.
And in terms of where the Ashes sits within our sport and the heritage of our sport, you know, we've got World Cups now, and New Zealand, we've had some fantastic series against New Zealand, and obviously over in Australia, the state of origin has grown and grown and grown. But an Ashes series, it's still special, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think because everybody, whatever sport you're interested in, everybody wants to beat Australia. And in Australia, whatever sport you're interested in, everybody wants to beat the Poms. So I think there's that kind of special rivalry, because, you know, it's I think if you go to Sydney, it's like being in the north of England, but it's got much better weather. Not just for rugby league, but I think the people are quite similar. It's kind of everybody speaks as they find, as we'd say in Yorkshire, and yeah, it's kind of that similar type of society is here. So people feel at home whether they're in the north of England or whether they're in Australia. So I think there is that element of it's a kind of it's a place where Headingley is a place where people feel comfortable, where they feel at home, and the Ashes series, I think, despite the fact we hadn't had one for such a long time, I think that kind of, you know, as they think football's coming home about England, but I think in a way the Ashes series has always played such an important role in the game until very recently, because it was like every 2 years. They'd come here, then 2 years we'd go out there, 2 years later they'd come back, and that was a regular cycle, and it was a way of the best testing each other. And I think one of the sad things is that for Australians, State of Origin has replaced the Ashes series. And I hope that this series will, first of all, I hope we'll beat them. But also, I think that, you know, we get a good test series, then it puts international rugby league back on the agenda and makes the Australians sit up and take notice. Because I think that's what we need. Because if we, you know, the World Cup is obviously the centrepiece of international rugby league, and it's great for developing nations, and it's great to put us on an international media stage. But in terms of the soul of the game, we need to get that rivalry back with Australia and make it a focus make it another focus for the game. Because I think the other thing that we've lost is that, you know, we have the Super League Grand Final, we have the Cup Final, but that element of that cycle of test matches against Australia, we've lost that, and it's a vital element that we need to get back, just to raise the game to an international level, but also to add another element, another taste of spice, because there's a whole thing about who's going to get selected for the Ashes test matches, who we're going to play against, and we need that back. We need that back to sort of just give the game more texture and give it a richer tapestry.
Yeah, I wonder after the Las Vegas event, where Australian fans got to see English fans again, making noise,
Yeah.
celebrating. I wonder if that triggers with them in their mind, thinking back to a fire and Henderson Gill and all those games and the occasions that came with it, and thinking, oh, actually, we want a bit of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think the other thing that's changed as well, which you hit on the head, it was with Vegas that people travel abroad now. Whereas for most of the time for the Ashes series, no fans went. It was just the players, and until the 1980s, there was no live coverage of Test match. I remember I'm old enough, sadly, to remember when we last won the Ashes in 1970 when I was a little kid, and we had to wait the following week to get the highlights on grandstand of the previous week's matches. So, but now we're in a world where obviously we've got the internet. You can see everything you want. If you can afford to pay for satellite TV, that's not a problem watching it. And the other thing we've got is that international travel is much easier. So I think as soon as the Ashes series is announced, there's going to be thousands of Australians who want to come over here and just take part in that experience. Because again, you talk to Australians and they miss it as well. It was a vital part of their game. So just the thrill of being coming over and coming to Headingley and see a Test match at Headingley and all the history that's associated with it. I imagine you're going to be able to sell the ground out 2 or 3 times.
You mentioned there that last Ashes win, 1970. What over the years? What's your Ashes memories? Any particular standout? Not too many victories, unfortunately. The odd Test here and there.
Yeah, well, I've got to say, sadly, I'm old enough to remember when we won, and that was that's kind of one of the defining features, I think, of being of me being a rugby league fan, remembering, and because I'm a Hull KR fan. Excuse me, and Roger Millwood was the star of that series, and so I always remember Eddie Waring's commentary when Roger scoots away to score. But so there's that. But as I mentioned before, the 1982 Test series when we were whitewashed by Australia, but Steve Evans managed to score a try in the corner at Headingley, which was just a great moment because we thought we'd never score. I think the other thing, which was kind of a sadly not Headingley, but was the 1990 second Test match at Old Trafford when 2 things. Paul Loughlin intercepted a Ricky Stewart pass, scored, and put us level with Australia. And for the first time since 1970, I thought we could win the Ashes here. It wasn't to be because Mal Meninga scored that try at the end, which the first time I went to Australia in the late 1990s, I got in a taxi one night and the guy said, you're a Pommy, aren't you? He said, do you watch the football? I said, yeah, rugby league. He said, yeah. I said, yeah. What about that try from Mal Meninga in 1990? Oh, no. So there's that, which I thought was a fantastic game because and again, this is the thing about being at a match. When Paul Loughlin intercepted the Stewart pass, you could feel everybody at Old Trafford breathe in with excitement. It was so exciting. It was like I thought I'm going to have a heart attack here. So if you actually win the Ashes, I'll be an emotional wreck. So there's that, and it's kind of the other thing I remember, which is again the other side of being any sports fan, is the 1970 World Cup final. Not strictly an Ashes match, but Great Britain versus Australia. Which took place just after we'd won the Ashes in October, November 1970, here at Headingley. And
the Battle of Leeds.
The Battle of Leeds, which, again, so I was confident that we were going to win. And it was one of the most frustrating, well, not probably, I've had more frustrating matches since, but as I say, whatever, 7 or 8. I couldn't understand how Great Britain were the favourites, but Australia just dominated all the time. And then it just broke out into fights. And then it became, there were fights. John Atkin got sent off. I think that for the only time in his life he'd ever got sent off because it was so brutal. And then after, and the fighting continued after. And then there was a big scandal in the press for the following week about, is this a game we want our children to play? And somebody called for the game to be banned in Leeds schools. Mm-hmm. So it was that's a memory both as a fan of being really frustrated, and everybody goes through it when your team don't perform, and then the kind of scandal at the end about people wanting to ban rugby league, which just horrified me. It still does. So it's kind of So a lot of my memories of the Ashes Test matches, Great Britain Australia Test matches, are really part of Headingley, and I think it's probably true for most rugby league fans, certainly of my age, that if you're a rugby league fan, particularly in Yorkshire, then a lot of your memories, good and bad, regardless of what club you support, are wrapped up here at Headingley as well, because it's, to use a case, it's a theatre of dreams and it's a theatre of memories.
Thank you very much, Tony. That's fantastic. When you're telling that story about Old Trafford, I'm already getting goosebumps thinking about that third test. It's 1-1 after two tests, coming to AMT Headingley, third test, and finally winning the Ashes.
Yeah.
Come on, boys. Make it happen. Make it happen this year. Thanks for joining us on the Leeds Rugby League Heritage podcast. It's been great to have you. Please make sure you subscribe and like. Give us a review to make sure we continue to share the word around Heritage and Leeds Rugby League. And we'll hear from you and see you next time.